Good morning again, everyone. To all the fathers and father figures, happy Father's Day. It's wonderful, a wonderful day to appreciate all of the things that our fathers do, and perhaps one of the things that doesn't get the appreciation that it deserves is the jokes that fathers tell, also known as dad jokes. So this is a phenomenon that actually crosses cultural divides. So there's people in Japan that tell dad jokes, and so they're called oyaji gyaku, which kind of translates to like old man jokes or something. So like older men, I guess, have the tendency to tell these kind of jokes. And there was a poll of 2,000 United Kingdom-based adults to what they consider to be the top cheesiest gags that fathers like to inflict on anyone. So I'll give you the top 10. So let's see, the top 10. Anyone remember like Letterman when he would do the top 10 list? And so, I don't know, I need like a fun graphic and my own like Paul Schaefer to like come and like talk with me. Anyway, okay, so number 10. Question, how do I look? Answer, with your eyes. There was 20, I cut them in half, so I could have done 20, but I'm doing 10. All right, number 9. What do you call a magician who lost their magic? Ian. Magician, no magic. It's Ian, all right. I know, I gotta work on my Letterman too. I should have cards up here, huh? All right, this takes me back when putting the car in reverse. So imagine putting the car in reverse. This takes me back, okay. Wife said, are you ever going to stop singing Wonderwall? And I said, maybe. I don't know if anyone, yeah, Oasis fan. All right, you got it. Maybe, gonna be the one. All right, number 5, question, can you put the cat out? Answer, I didn't know it was on fire. All right, number 4, I used to hate facial hair, but then it grew on me. Number 3, question, Dad, can you put my shoes on? A, no. Answer, no, I don't think they'll fit me. Number 2, I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. And the number 1 dad joke based on 2,000 United Kingdom-based adults. This graveyard looks overcrowded. People must be dying to get in. That was the response I was expecting. Perfect. All right. You know, it's funny. As kind of an aside, I was in Vegas with a bunch of friends, and we went to Arizona to see the Grand Canyon. That's where the Grand Canyon's at, right? Yeah, okay. So we had to drive there, and one of our friends rented a car. We were driving, and we ended up going over this like hill on the way over. And he was going kind of fast, and then as the hill kind of happens, right, you start to pick up speed. And it ended up being like a speed trap, so there was a cop there and pulled us over. So he was looking at my friend's driver's license as he was writing up the ticket, and it was like, oh, you're in the Bay Area? Have you heard of this place, Colma? And he's like, Colma? Yeah, I mean, I have heard of it. And he's like, oh yeah, I hear it's really popular. It's like, really? I haven't really heard people moving to Colma. Yeah, Colma is really popular. It seems like people are dying to go there. Okay, so that one maybe lost upon some people. If you're familiar with the Bay Area, there's a city called Colma, and they have a lot of cemeteries there, and per capita, they actually have more people who are dead than are alive. Yeah, so actually, I think that's where our bishop's burial ground is, right? Yeah. So if you're ever in Colma, you should go, and you can visit where all of our bishops are buried, or at least a lot of them are. Anyway, all right, so back to dad jokes. What makes a dad joke? A study was done by the British Psychological Society, and you have to have some kind of like theory as to what humor is, and then further than that, what a theory of a dad joke is. So basically, what makes them funny is simply that they're unfunny. And they're so unfunny, and so it makes us laugh. So this idea of being unfunny is that humor has to go against some kind of like societal norm, and dad jokes are all puns, right? So they have this double meaning, and with this double meaning, it violates the social norm of every word has one meaning when you're trying to express something to someone else. So it violates that, so it's some kind of humor, but the level of the humor is so low on like the spectrum of humor that it's rather unfunny. And that's actually kind of embarrassing, right? To have like somebody who's with you and they're telling these kind of dad jokes. And oftentimes they'll tell it in front of their children, right? Where they'll say like, you go to the restaurant and it's like, oh, hi, you know, my name's Matt and I'll be your waiter for today. And I'm like, oh, hi, man, I'll be your diner for today or something. Something really dumb like that. And so there's this, this very particular form of dad joke that it plays on words and it's also quite unfunny to the point where being embarrassing. So looking into dad jokes and perhaps the science behind them, the British Psychological Survey in their study, they found that it actually aligns with how fathers are kind of in general and their raising. So this is all, you know, generalizations. All fathers are, of course, different. Some people are more in the father role, some people are more in this like mother role. And it's not that mothers do not display any of these characteristics, but it just so happens that generally, there is a way that fathers tend to parent and treat their children versus how mothers do. So what that entails is that fathers kind of have this more rougher style of dealing with children. So they tend to tease, they tend to be a little more rougher, you know, like physically with like roughhousing and stuff. And supposedly, as an evolutionary standpoint, the reason for doing this, it helps build children's resilience. So when you're playing with them kind of roughly, you're building them to be resilient when they, you know, fall down inevitably. And with this sort of teasing, then you teach them to be resilient when people will end up teasing them or they have something happening to them, psychologically to be resilient against that. And within this framework, dad jokes also exist as this tool, which is very important for children, by telling jokes so bad that they're embarrassing that it pushes the children's limits to be embarrassed, right? So all of us in life will end up being embarrassed in some way, right? Whether with it's our friends or perhaps, you know, professionally if things don't go our way. But being embarrassed is just a part of being life. When we live in a society with other people, when we have relationships with others, this is just a potential thing that can happen. And so by dads forcing their children to be embarrassed through these terrible jokes, it, in a very safe way, right, enables them to push their limits of how embarrassed they can be. So in a safe space where you're with your parents, you know they're not actually trying to be mean or like bully you. They're just trying to be, you know, funny and friendly in this way. And in that sense, it actually also teaches children how to respond to embarrassment, where if you can laugh at yourself, as you can kind of see it as a joke, then it's easier, much easier for you to continue on with your life instead of wallowing in this sense of like embarrassment and feeling so terrible. And sometimes, right, like, which is also quite common, dads will tell the same dad jokes over and over again. And so by giving them this practice, then you hear the same joke over and over, then the embarrassment is a little bit less each and every time. Or supposedly, I don't know, maybe it's still embarrassing the like 10th time you hear it. So it was summed up pretty succinctly in one of the surveys done by the study, and one of the dads was asked about it. And so one dad put it, I think it's important to embarrass your kids. Or to be more specific, I think it's important to do things traditionally viewed as embarrassing until your kids are basically immune to the effects. After years and years of being exposed to eye-roll inducing humor with a complete disregard for what anybody else thinks, kids will have nothing greater left to fear. They'll gradually build up a strong immunity to judgment and embarrassment and actually feel empowered to be themselves. So there's this sense that we can help children to become themselves by embarrassing them a little bit here and there, and they can then stand that sense of embarrassment if they feel like being themselves would entail anything like that. So in this sense, it's actually really kind for dads to be giving these kind of dad jokes. How this relates to Buddhism and resiliency, I feel, is that within Buddhism, we have the archetype, the ideal, the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago. And initially, he lived in this palace where everything that was supposed to cause suffering was removed and taken away from him. And he always felt like something was missing. It was only when he was able to go out and see suffering, something that made him uncomfortable, not just with the world, but with himself, that he was able to go on this journey, which was very hard. It had a lot of suffering, a lot of trials and tribulations in it, but he was able to come out on the other end as an enlightened being and able to teach. So in the same way, it's taught to us that we have to go through these kind of sufferings in order to grow as people. And actually, rather, it's only because of that that we're able to. So the quote that I read earlier was from the chapter on the transformed Buddha bodies and lands from Shinran's Kyogyo Shinsho. And really the line that I wanted to take out of it was that the beings of the 10 quarters in the same way transmigrate within the 6 courses, endlessly revolving in circles. They flounder in the waves of desire and sink in the sea of pain. So this is supposed to paint this picture for who we are as human beings, that because we have desire, because we have this attachment, we are then forced to sink in this sea of pain. So we're constantly met with pain because of our ego, because of our selfishness. However, there's a further elaboration where talking about people who have not quite achieved that level of shinjin, of giving themselves over to Amida Buddha, it says, such people do not realize the Buddha's benevolence and do not respond in gratitude to it. Though they perform practices, they give rise to contempt and arrogance in their hearts. For they always act for the sake of fame and profit. They have been enveloped in self-attachment unawares, and do not approach fellow practicers and true teachers. Preferring to involve themselves in worldly affairs, they obstruct themselves and block others from the right practice for birth. So for myself, reading this and thinking about these dad jokes, about embarrassment, about resilience, when we have something that causes us pain, that causes us embarrassment, how do we respond? And so the Jodo Shinshu way, the way that we're taught, is to respond in gratitude, which at the time can be very difficult, but with practice we can reach that point. And this is to lessen our suffering when we understand that if we respond in a different way, if we respond with selfishness, if we respond for the sake of fame and profit for ourselves, then it'll only give us more pain. So the opposite of that is to respond in gratitude. And while the Buddha was able to understand things completely, and it made it very easy to be grateful, all of us have to put in a little bit more work to understand why we should be grateful, and really most of that only happens with just living life. But for this one example, when we have dads that give us these dad jokes, instead of responding with an eye roll of embarrassment, we can put our hands together, we can respond in gratitude. So we can say, thank you dad for these terrible, awful jokes, because in your own way, you're trying to make us better, make us more resilient, and make our lives that much more happy. So we can all put our hands together now for all the dads for giving us such terrible, awful jokes. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.